Good afternoon and welcome to the How to Compose a Compelling ALC Application and Portfolio webinar. We'll give everybody just a minute to get in before we get started. Hi, everybody. We'll get started in just a minute. You want to get comfortable? All right, that looks like that's just about everybody. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's How to Compose a Compelling ALC Application and Portfolio webinar. My name is Melissa Lutz. I'm the Programming and Events Manager for RLI, and I'll be your host today. The Realtors Land Institute, the Voice of Land, is the nation's oldest and largest network of land professionals. The land real estate industry is a unique, complex, and ever-changing industry. For professionals who want to specialize in land and connect to the knowledge, resources, and people necessary to build a career in land real estate, the Realtors Land Institute is the designation for land expertise. While this webinar does not count as credit towards RLI's elite accredited land consultant designation, it is filled with valuable expertise. It also will be recorded today and posted on our website, so you can refer back to it as you're compiling your ALC portfolio. Today, our presenters will explain the specifics on how to successfully construct your portfolio and key insights to exactly what the ALC committee is looking for as they review your materials. We'd love to hear from you today during the presentation, so please feel free to type your questions in the chat box throughout the presentation. We'll answer those at the end of the presentation. Now I'm pleased to introduce our presenters today. Our 2023 ALC committee chair is longstanding RLI member Norma Nisbet, also in ALC. She's a former RLI president who has dedicated countless hours to RLI, serving on the ALC Designation Committee for well over a decade. She was part of the Chicago 60 that was able to keep RLI's doors open when we were on the verge of bankruptcy in 2002. She was national president in 2004 and was instrumental in rewriting the RLI bylaws in 2016. We're also joined by our CEO, Aubrie Kobernus. She has 20 years of experience in the real estate industry, has led RLI since 2016, and works directly with our ALC Designation Committee, personally reviewing every ALC application before it is sent to our Designation Committee for review. So let's get started.
Excellent. Melissa, thank you so much. I am going to share my screen so everybody can see the presentation. Give me 1 second. All right. Welcome, everyone, to the webinar, How to Compose a Compelling ALC Application and Portfolio. Norma and I are very excited to be here with you today. As Melissa just stated, Norma has been, she's served on this committee for many, many years. She has served as chair more than once. So she's a wonderful resource to share with you exactly what the committee is looking for when they are reviewing your portfolios. I am here, as Melissa stated, I am the staff liaison to the ALC Designation Committee. I do the review of your application and portfolio and make sure it's ready to be sent to the Designation Committee for review. So together, we look at literally every single application that comes in, and we're excited to share with you today what we're looking for so you can make your application and portfolio as strong as possible. So before we get started, I did want to share this video. We think that being an ALC is extremely important, but I wanted you to hear from your fellow members why becoming an ALC is important to them. So here we go.
When I was looking for designations to get some further education, I decided to pick the ALC designation because no one else had it in my marketplace. Everyone else had other designations, but 10% difference, 100% better. I wanted to do something to differentiate myself from the competitors in the marketplace.
The biggest thing for me was probably the networking and the camaraderie and just the top-notch education, you know, getting it hands-on, having real-life scenarios that I could immediately apply to my business when I got back was huge for me.
What's helped me with my ALC designation is actually the relationships that I built by going through the educational classes. I've had multiple referrals from other individuals, from other ALCs that were sitting in those educational classes with me. You build a bond with them, and it actually generates the referrals and leads for you in your local market from agents all over. And without going to those ALC classes and having that, I wouldn't have made those connections that I did.
Not always do we sell the property ourselves, as other people may have the buyer, we may have the seller. So that's where the value comes, is working together in that regard with ALCs.
The process to get the ALC is not an easy process. I'm not trying to scare anybody, but I also want people to understand it's not an easy thing to achieve. It's a symbol of expertise. It's a symbol of knowing that you are the best of the best. So it shouldn't come easily.
Excellent. Okay. Now that we've heard why to become an ALC, I wanted to do a quick overview of the requirements. So the first part of working towards your ALC are the education requirements. We have 3 required courses: Land 101, Land Investment Analysis, and Transitional Land Real Estate. We also have 3 additional courses you have to take, 2 of which have to be a specialty course, so from the middle box, and then either 1 elective course or an additional specialty course.
Aubrie,
Yes.
I think you need to maybe change the slideshow view, because I think we're still seeing just the presentation. We're not actually seeing the slides as they're moving forward.
Yes, we need to see the slides. Thank you,
There we
Melissa.
go.
Oh,
Perfect.
okay. Sorry about that. I don't know why that did not happen. Slideshow view. Is that better? Are you seeing the slideshow view? Or...
We are. You'll need to advance them though, so everybody can see the additional slides that come after these.
Okay. Did y'all see the video?
Yes.
We could hear.
We could hear it.
Yeah, we could hear it, but didn't see it.
Oh, well, that's not good. Okay, let's move forward. I don't know why that did not happen since it worked on the practice, but here we go. Okay. I'll tell you what then. I'm going to stop that and then just come here then. Let me pause share. Stop share. Okay. Y'all are now seeing the PowerPoint, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Once you complete all of the education courses, then it's important to, then it's time to take the ALC comprehensive exam. That is the last educational requirement. And once you've completed the exam, then you will be eligible to submit your application and portfolio once you meet those requirements. So I want to reiterate, it's important to always check our website for the updated forms and criteria. We make changes from time to time to the documentation or to the forms. Online, they will always be the most up-to-date. We have a few brokerages or companies that will download them and keep them for their brokers. Always check the website and make sure that you're using the most up-to-date information. Now, there are 3 main qualifying categories for the ALC. The vast majority of our members come through the sales, brokerage, development, investment, and consulting category. In addition to that, we also allow a path for appraisers and for farm and forestry managers. Today, we're going to focus more on the sales, brokerage, development categories because that's what the vast majority of the applications are for. there's a lot of questions about the volume requirements, what our rules are in regards to volume requirements and how we define things. So we're going to spend some time focusing on that. The first one is the 51% rule. This is how we define a land transaction. For us, the value of the land, including improvements that are agricultural in nature. So barns, livestock operations, equine facilities, fence posts, all of those things, if it's agricultural in nature, that it counts towards the land value. So the value of the land must account for at least 51% of the sales price. If the value of the land is not 51% of the sales price, it's not a land transaction. It also does not have to be vacant land. We get that misconception a lot. There can be structures or improvements on the land, but the land value or the ag improvements have to account for at least 51% of the sales price. All transactions submitted in your portfolio, including the residential transactions, must meet the 51% rule. We're going to talk more about residential transactions in a minute, but this is important. We want to see land transactions in your portfolio. If we cannot clearly see that it's a land transaction, it will not count. Now, time period. All of the transactions submitted within your portfolio must have been closed within the 5-year period prior to the date of your portfolio submittal. Okay, so if you submit it today on September 26th, they need to have been completed within 5 years of September 26, 2023. Okay. Now, this residential definition, this is important for multiple reasons with your application. If you are submitting a residential transaction, for us, for it to count towards the designation, it has to have at least 5 acres. Residential transactions less than 5 acres will not count. And the 51% rule must still apply. So if you have a 5-acre transaction where the house is worth 75% of the value, that will not count towards your designation. If you have a 5-acre transaction where the house is worth 49% of the value, it would apply. Commercial transactions or other transactions can be less than 5 acres, but if it is a single family parcel, that makes it a residential transaction and it has to have at least 5 acres. We also have limitations on personal and family dealings. We know that many real estate professionals own their own real estate, and you might deal with some of your own. That's okay. But we do not want your entire ALC portfolio to be your personal transactions or transactions for your personal family members. We want to see that you have real world market experience. Because of that, no more than 20% of the transactions submitted may be personal or immediate family dealings. And we define immediate family dealings as any transaction that would require disclosure in the state in which the transaction was conducted, okay? And we will count for that 20%, so make sure you follow that. For volume calculations, if you represent one side, so let's say you represent the seller, that's 100% of you get 100% of the sales volume. If you represent both sides, buyer and seller, you get 200% of the sales volume. Our volume requirement spreadsheet will automatically calculate these if you fill it in correctly. So you don't have to add any formulas or adjust anything. It will calculate itself. Additionally, we see more and more people working in teams, and that's fine. But please understand, your ALC designation is a personal achievement. It's a personal designation, not a team designation. So with that, if there is more than one agent on your side of the transaction, you only get to claim a percentage of that volume. So for simplicity's sake, let's say there's 2 people on your side, a husband and wife team. You get 50% of the volume for that transaction, okay? And we're going to get into this a little bit more later. You can explain what you did in that transaction to help qualify and quantify the percentage that you're claiming. But if it's less than 100%, you need to explain that. Make it very clear to the committee so they understand the transaction. Now, there are two main paths to the ALC when you're going through the sales and brokerage category. The first one that we hear most about is the $10 million path. So you have to show at least $10 million in land sales from at least 5 separate transactions, okay? You cannot do one major deal or 2 major deals and get your ALC. We have to see at least 5 separate transactions. If you have done more than $10 million in land sales over the last 5 years, don't send us every single transaction, okay? Show us 10 million, get above that $10 million mark, and then you can stop. Now, the other path is 25 separate land transactions. And we allow this path because we know there are certain parts of the country where we know land values are not high enough for anybody to really get to that $10 million category.
Right.
So we want a path for those of you that are in markets without high land values that allows you to get the ALC. So this is 25 separate land transactions. With this path, you do not get to double count a transaction. If you represented both sides, it is still one transaction. So we need 25 separate land transactions. There's a caveat here when it comes to residential projects or residential transactions. No more than 20% of the 25 separate transactions, so no more than 5 transactions, can come from one residential project, subdivision, or development, okay? And they will count, believe me. So you can have multiple residential projects represented, but you cannot have more than 5 from any one project. And residential transactions, remember, must have at least 5 acres, and you still have to show that the land and ag improvements are worth 51% of the sales price. The other caveat for the 25 separate land transactions is that in situations where you have multiple transactions with the same buyer and the same seller that close the same day on the same closing statement. So sometimes you see one buyer buying multiple parcels. So each parcel was listed separately. They're technically separate transactions, but they all close on the same day. They're on the same closing statement. For us, those count as one transaction.
One transaction.
Yes. Thank you, Norma.
Just
to show you how important this is.
It wasn't that long ago that we experienced this situation. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yes, no, you're exactly right. So the committee will notice that. And if you list them separately, I'll be coming back to you and saying we need additional transactions before I can send this to the committee because it is noticed. Now, when you are ready to submit your application, there's 2 parts to it. One is the application itself, okay? The application is asking for personal information. So what name? How do you want your name listed on your ALC application? What address do you want us to send your plaque to? Those types of things. There's the $350 non-refundable application fee. We want to see if you're a member of the National Association of Realtors because that is required. We need a copy of your professional license. The disclosure, if you've had a real estate commission violation or a felony conviction within 5 years of your application, this is your one time to explain it. If we find out afterwards that you did not disclose it and it was within the time frame, we have the right to revoke your designation. We don't want to do that, but if you disclose it, everything is fine. We want to see that you've completed your education requirements, that you have your ALC exam certificate. If you are doing fast track, verification of whatever is making you eligible for fast track, and then your signature. When you sign, you are verifying that you were the person involved in all of the transactions submitted in your application, and you're reiterating your understanding that in order to maintain your ALC designation and continue marketing yourself as an ALC, you understand that you have to continue being a member of the Realtors Land Institute and the National Association of Realtors, okay? That's an important point. The next part is your portfolio. And Norma is going to go into detail in a moment of the transaction narrative forms. But for me, what I'm looking at when I get your portfolio, we want to see your resume showing at least 3 years of experience in real estate. That is the main thing that we're looking for. We want to see all of your professional experience, but we're checking to see your experience in real estate. And I'll say this, if you're going to list Realtors Land Institute membership in that or what have you on your resume, please make sure you list our name correctly. I can't tell you the number of resumes I get that show member of Real Estate Institute or Rural Land Institute. If you're going to list it, make sure you get the name right. That goes very far with the committee. The next part is your essay explaining why you would like to become an ALC. There is no right or wrong answer to this. What the committee is really looking for is what is your personal motivation to get the designation, or what do you hope to do with it? So they're just trying to get some insight into who you are. Then come the volume requirements. The first is going to be the volume requirement spreadsheet. We ask you to attach that separately in the original Excel format. That makes it easier for me if we need to make any changes later on. And then your transaction narrative forms. Every transaction narrative form must be signed by your broker. If you are your own broker, you still have to sign the transaction narrative form. Do not send us unsigned forms because I will send them back to you. The broker is signing to verify that you as the agent were the person responsible for that transaction and that the documentation submitted is true and accurate. So again, even if you're your own broker, we need you to sign those forms. I'm also going to be looking to see, are the questions answered adequately? For me, is there an answer for every question? And is it more than a few words or a sentence? If you submit a sentence for each one of those questions, I'm going to send it back and say we need more information. The form clearly states that we need at least a paragraph for each one, and it matters to the committee. I'm also going to be checking to see, did you submit every every transaction that is included on your volume requirement spreadsheet must have a transaction narrative form that goes along with it in the order that it's listed on the volume requirement spreadsheet. And then the last thing is the proof of every transaction. We need proof that those transactions occurred and that you were involved in those transactions. We have 2 ways for you to show proof of transaction. One is you can have the title company sign and verify, or you can submit 2 supporting documents, not 1, but 2. Examples of that, and you can choose based on what you have available. A closed MLS sheet, and it does need to be closed, okay? The redacted HUD-1 or closing statement, a redacted signed contract, recorded and signed deeds, or proof of commission payment. Any of those, but we need 2 proofs of supporting documents. We also need 2 letters of recommendation from current ALCs, okay? One of them should be local, and we define local as being from your local market, which could be your state or your regional chapter. The idea is that hopefully we get somebody that knows you personally and your reputation in the marketplace. Those can be sent directly to us at the email address listed on the page, alcapp@rliland.com. And again, the submittal process, you submit 1 email. Sometimes it takes more because some of the PDFs they can be large files with all of the different things that you're including in there. But ideally, 1 PDF titled Part 1 that includes your application and the supporting documentations for your application. Then Part 2, which is your portfolio, has your resume, your essay, transaction narrative forms in order with the supporting documentation. And then separately, your volume requirement spreadsheet and your headshot that you want us to use when we promote that you get your designation. Your headshot should be in an electronic format, a JPEG or a PNG file, so we can easily use that. PDFs are not easy for us to use with your headshot. So if it takes more than one email to get that to us, that is fine. Just in the last email, let us know how many you sent so we can make sure we received them all. Okay. So you submit it to the ALC app at rliland.com email, and online you pay your $350 application fee. I want to reiterate to everyone as well, your ALC application is a professional representation of you and your expertise. With that, we expect it to be presented professionally. And I can tell you the committee does not they do not favor applications that have multiple spelling issues, that have poor grammar, that are inconsistent, and that are not complete. So I will often send it back to people and say, please have someone you trust review this for you and send it back to me before I send it to the committee. So please take that extra step before you submit your application to make sure you are putting yourself in the best light possible for the committee. And so once you're ready to submit and you send it to the website, it's going to go through multiple review stages. The first is the initial review, where when we get it in, we're doing a quick check to see if all of the components are included. If not, you'll likely get an email either from Jerry in our office or from me stating, this is what we're missing. It is not going into detail yet. It's the pre-committee review where we are looking at it in detail. And that's the review that I do in detail, trying to look through everything. I'm checking for completion and I'm checking for consistency. I'm trying to make sure that it complies with all of our rules and our criteria. My goal is to get your application as clean as possible so that the committee has as easy time as possible reviewing it. Once I feel good about it, then I send it to the committee for review. This is the final review, and this is the one that counts, okay? But often it will generate more questions. I'm not a real estate professional. I've never bought and sold land, so they see things that I don't see. And often I'll be following up with applicants saying the committee's reviewing your application. They have questions on this, this, and this, and I'll be the conduit in between. Now that we've talked about the steps to get it ready for the committee review, I'm going to turn it over to Norma to go into more detail on the committee review itself, and we're going to look at the transaction narrative forms. So Norma, I'm throwing it over to you.
Now comes the fun part, right? Well, listen, everyone, everything that Aubrie has shared with you is very important. It is on point. It is what you need to follow, the instructions, the how-tos, and how to present yourself, because we are the committee that are reviewing the resumes and all of the forms and the transactions. But keep in mind, this is your opportunity to present your professional self to us. Your chance to make the first impression of your professionalism, your business, who you are, and who you aspire to be in the land business. And believe it or not, by the time that we are through reviewing someone's entire resume, all the forms, the narratives, everything that is involved, we have a pretty good idea, at least I should speak for myself, I have a pretty good idea of you, who you are, your business, how you conduct yourself in your business, your region, the type of land, what types of properties you are involved with, and in general, your overall professionalism. And that's what it's about ultimately. We're here to help you get the ALC designation, to be able to walk away and be proud of that designation that you have worked so hard for. So with that, let's go ahead and we'll start where really this is where the rubber meets the road, I believe, when we go through the narrative forms. First off, can we pull the form up on this? There we go. Okay, thank you.
Of course.
First off, you see the transaction number. Well, that sounds pretty simple, correct? But make sure that that transaction number matches the number on your spreadsheet. I think that was pulled up previously, but make sure that transaction number, yes, matches the number on the spreadsheet. And make no mistake, it can be easy to transpose numbers and transactions, and especially when you have a number of them. So as Aubrie has suggested to others, go back, have someone else reliable review what you have done. Then back to number 2 on the narrative form, the date of transaction. That's the date of the closed transaction, when it closed. The property address, the actual physical address of the property, if there is one, and if not, whatever we can get that the basis of a legal address. And we're not asking for the full legal surveying description, okay, just the property address that we have, that a simple short version that would come on a tax ID, as well as then the parcel and the tax ID number to follow. The type and description of land. And again, we're not looking for a dissertation here. What we're looking for is, it was wooded, hilly, ideal for hunting. Maybe it was farm ground, situated and utilized for row crops, or an agribusiness of some form. Maybe it was a commercial site, or it could be rolling hills with some timber and a small lake. Just a brief type of the property of land and a land description. The total acreage, I think that speaks for itself. The current use and the zoning. We do want the current use, but we also want the zoning that is per the governing entity, whether it be the city, the county, whatever area it is, what the zoning classification is. Not the zoning classification that will kick up when you're entering your property into an MLS or some form of data internet system. We want the zoning that the county, that is on the tax records, that the county has it listed as. And then your total sale price. And the total sale price of the transaction itself, it's good. Many of them also put then a per acre price. And I always like to see that. We don't have that down, but it is good to, along with the total sale price, to break it down. If it was $100,000, $10,000 an acre, you know, lay it out that way. Now, this is where it gets interesting. And again, this is the part that Aubrie's talking about that can be somewhat confusing as we go on to it in the explanations. This is the candidate participation. And this we look at very closely and often sends up red flags. Make sure that you have your role in the transaction categorized correctly on this sheet. If you were the listing agent, you're part of a team, the buyer's agent. If you co-listed with another individual, or maybe co-listed with another brokerage firm. If it was an auction, or if this was a referral. Then look at the next section. If this was a co-listing or a team listing, this is where, again, we are looking for the level of participation and how you interacted and the role that you played in the transaction. How many agents were involved on your side of the team? And your, excuse me, your participation as reflected in column 8 on the volume requirements on the spreadsheet. And this again goes back to the spreadsheet that we have. And very, very important, often red flags are sent up. And it isn't because it's intentional. Often it's just because the individual didn't know correctly how to fill out the form. So we need to have that percentage correctly filled out so that it matches that particular transaction number from the narrative form. And if you have any questions about that when you're working on it, you know, by all means, get a hold of someone at the office or myself so that we can help you get through the rough part of it, because it's so important. If you trigger a red flag here, that means there may be more on down the line. And we can always discuss this more in the Q&A part of the session. Now we're going down into the narrative of the transaction itself, and we're talking about the transaction. The first question to answer, we need a yes or no. Were there improvements on the property? Answer yes or no. We want to see that answer. The next is again, the breakdown of the 51% rule that Aubrie went into pretty clearly. But if you have any more questions upon that, we'll be happy to share. But what I would like to say is what we like to see them do is to break down if there is an improvement on the property. So you've got a 3,000 square foot small metal building on 50 acres, but the building was only, valued or appraised at or had a per square foot value of maybe 25,000 for a replacement value, then that would be what that would qualify as a land transaction because it was less than the 51% rule. So that's what we're looking for. If you can give us the numbers and the quick breakdown of a valuation on or appraised value of a particular improvement if it is on the property and is not agricultural related. So what were the buyers and sellers' objectives? And this again is where you have the access and the information because you represented either one of these individually, or you worked as a dual agent or maybe a transaction broker. So again, your position, your role, and what the buyers and sellers were looking for, what they wanted to accomplish, were they successful? And we don't need a thesis. We don't need a full dissertation, but we do need it to be concise and the few solid sentences to give a brief explanation and, as Aubrie said, a nice short paragraph. How did the transaction go? What were some of the challenges, solutions, outcomes? And there are very seldom any that are a slam dunk. When they do, it's almost so easy that you don't believe you had it anyway. But there's always something that usually pops up. So we asked, just describe what those activities might be, what the issues were. Was it a title issue? Did you have to, go back and do further investigation? Did you have problems with easements that supposedly were in place, but guess what? They aren't. Did you have legal issues, bringing in legal counsel to fight over ingress or egress and determine what was supposedly represented with the transaction, but it didn't happen. So there are so many of these issues that can pop up and often do that. It's anything and everything can happen before you get to the closing table. But again, try and list it as concise as possible and legible so that we can understand it and read it. But most importantly, I want to get back to the position of the team and working together, what your role is in this. And keep in mind, often we will have applications that say, we did this and we did that, and this was for us or for our group. Well, sometimes we need to know when you go back to the front page of the narrative form and it says you were the only individual involved. And when we see your descriptions and you're talking about we and us, who is we and us? So that's sending up a red flag. We will go back to Aubrie and say, hey, they're talking about we here. Who is we? Is it the marketing team in the office? Is it two other members that they didn't list on under the first section, the first page of the narrative? So we look at all of that and we do review it. We do read it, believe me. So you want to watch your pronouns and how if you did it and you alone did it, try and do that. And if you have a separate marketing team, just say, I went to the marketing team and they handled this, this, and this, but I was responsible for the transaction. So we need that clarification. And I think Aubrie will verify that that's probably the one area she has to go back and get clarification and get it back to the committee, because we're thinking if they say we, they mean that there's more than one involved in the transaction and they didn't solely do it themselves. And again, you're talking about everything that you went to complete the deal, your role in the transaction. That's where we watch those pronouns. And then please describe what you did to serve your client, market the property, bring the transaction to completion. So list all of those details. That's what we're looking for. Often some of our applicants do some unusual, extraordinary things to finally assist a client to make the deal happen. And that also tells us the caliber of individual you are and the service that you provide to your client. Then if there's any additional information that you think we should know that helps explain the transaction, insert it here. And again, as I said, we don't need a full thesis or dissertation. We need it to be as concise and detailed as possible, and what you think is important, what was important to you, to your clients in the transaction. And of course, then we move down and we get into the proof of the transaction, which
Norma.
Aubrie has already gone over. But this is where you would have the title company. If they are going to sign off on it, then we need that title company verification. Thank you. So you would have the closing company, the title, the verifier, their position, their signature, verifying your transaction. Then we ask that, well, no, I don't think we are asking them, but for the support documentation, it's good if they would highlight what documents they're sending along with each transaction, and that may vary. So then we review the closing statements, the contracts, anything that you send, we are reviewing that. And all of the pertinent confidential information does need to be redacted, because we do not want to be responsible for some of your clients' proprietary information, as well as anything proprietary in your area or with your business as well. And of course, those are all listed there. I can repeat those if you like, but I think Aubrie covered that pretty well. And then as she mentioned again, even if you are the only broker in your firm, it's your baby, sign off on it. We need that signature for broker verification. And if you're not, then great, make sure that your broker knows what you're doing. In fact, I would share with them, when you start working on your narrative and putting your resume together, let your broker know so that they can work with you. And if you need guidance, then they're there to support you as well. But we certainly want them and need to have that confirmation with their signature. And with that, I think we've pretty well covered it. But as I said, whether you believe it or not, we have an idea of who you are and how you do business by the time we have reviewed the professional letters that are sent in, your essay, your bio. We review all of that. And we have members who will even on occasion take the parcel number, and if they're not sure about something, they will do their own property search and find out any information. If for some reason it's not making sense, as you know, in this day and age of the internet, we can find out and search just about everything. So, and it is often done. Am I not correct, Aubrie?
You are 100% correct. Yes, if the committee has questions or they're not understanding something, they certainly will Google and use the tools that they have at their fingertips to find the information themselves. And if they find information that is contrary to what's presented in the application, that obviously raises red flags and, opens up a whole nother can of worms, because they're asking even harder questions, and transactions might be thrown out and asked to, you might be asked to replace that transaction if they think that it should not count. So,
and importantly, again, I would like to go back and say that section on candidate participation, that is typically where there will be, if there's going to be some issues, it's not understanding exactly what percentages you're filling in, what needs to be on the spreadsheet. Just keep in mind that the spreadsheet and the narrative form need to match. That number 9, that's number 9 on the participation there. And we need to have that transaction correlate and totally correspond so that they're consistent with the spreadsheet. That'll be the first red flag if there is one.
And I'll say as well on the transaction narrative questions, these right here, what was your specific role in the transaction? Do not just state, I was the buyer's agent, and leave it at that. They really want to see more detail than that. The way you perform your role as a buyer's agent could be completely different than how they approach being a buyer's agent. They want to know specifics, what you did to serve your client, market the property, and bring the transaction to completion. The other thing I would say is please do not copy and paste your responses on every single transaction narrative form. If you copy and paste your answers to these questions, believe me, the committee knows. And they don't like to see copy and paste. One, the transactions are not all the same. And then two, again, it goes to your professionalism. They want to see that you've taken the time to fill these out. And I will say as well, if you wait to do all of this in one weekend, it gets tiresome filling out all of these forms. But if you start working on this as you're going through your transactions, so once a transaction closes and you know it meets the land definition, fill out the form while everything is fresh on your brain and set it aside. Create an ALC application folder on your computer and just start saving them there. That will make your process so much easier when it comes time to prepare your application and portfolio.
I would suggest also keep in mind in the process of when you are closing transactions and when you are working with your title company, if you want to save yourself some time, that would be have your paperwork in hand so that the title company can sign off on it at the time. This is going to save you collecting and sharing a lot of the documentation that we're requiring. If you just get the title company to sign off on it and verify your closing. So keep that in mind.
Yes. Yes.
And if you've had some recent ones and you're working on a resume at this point, I would say get your paperwork together and go talk to your title company, whoever the closer was, and have everything verified. This will assist and help you tremendously.
Yes. And then I'll share the volume requirement spreadsheet real quick as well. I mentioned earlier, or Norma mentioned the columns here. So you want to make sure that your numbers match what's on the transaction narrative form. And you really want to make sure that all of the information that's presented on the volume requirement spreadsheet matches what you submit on the transaction narrative form. So the closing date should match, the property address. Make sure there's just something that they can easily see. Yes, these are the same transactions. Sometimes we see people list, city and state on one form, and then they have the full property address on another one, and it's hard to make sure that they're the same transaction. So you want to make it as clear for the committee as possible. We want the total sales price, the total acreage. Who did you represent, buyer, seller, or both? Then the fee should correspond. And again, if you fill this out correctly, your total qualifying amount will automatically populate. Once this gets to $10 million, again, you can stop. They don't need to see that you've completed every land transaction so that it's $45 million. They want to see that you meet the requirements. And once you've met those requirements, you can stop. Unless they ask you for additional transactions, and that'll be going back and forth with me. But
the main thing is being consistent. This spreadsheet needs to be consistent with the narrative form.
Yes, consistency is key. All right, with that, Norma, anything else to add, or are we ready to open it up to questions?
Let's open it up for questions, because I think we will probably be sharing additional information by virtue of the questions that we will be answering, and let's let everyone participate.
Yes, yes. All right, let's see.
So for the first question we have from Derek is asking if you use transactions from a few years ago or are now with a different brokerage, do you have to have your previous broker sign the narrative forms?
Should be signed.
Yes, I would say yes. Ideally, we would like to have your previous broker sign the forms, because again, that brokerage attestation is that you were the agent involved, and your previous broker is going to be the one that knows that. So ideally, we would want to have the previous brokerage.
You were with that company at the time.
Yes.
And then I had another question emailed to me. I have 40 years of experience, completed over 100 land transactions, totaling over $30 million in the past 5 years, and I teach classes on land. Is there any way that would count or towards or bypass some of the class requirements?
Unfortunately, the answer to that is no. Experience in and of itself does not allow you to fast track through the education requirements. If you have a CCIM, SIOR, CRE, and a handful of other designations, then you would qualify for fast track. Or if you have a real estate degree with a GPA of at least 3.0 or higher, then you would qualify for fast track. Unfortunately, we get questions like that all the time, and experience itself does not allow you to fast track through the education courses.
I think we have MAI is also one of those.
Thank you. Yes, I knew I was forgetting one. We made some changes recently. So, but any questions, always go to our website. Melissa posted the link in the chat. Those can always be answered there.
Thank you. Sandra is asking, can you use transactions where you are the managing broker with a new agent and had significant involvement in the transaction, even though the new agent was the buyer's agent?
So we made a change recently. We did allow managing brokers to get the designation. We did not get many people coming through that process, and we made some changes recently where we were doubling down on the fact that this is that this is a real estate transaction designation. And so ultimately the answer to that is no, unless you are co-listing it with that new agent. You would not get credit for it by simply acting in a managing broker capacity.
Thank you. And then Danette has asked, is it $10 million or 5 transactions, or is it both for the requirement?
Both.
Both. You
Both.
have to have at least 5 transactions that total $10 million. So the goal is 10 million or more, but you have to have at least 5 transactions. So if you can get that in 5 and it's over 10 million, that's fine. Very rarely do we see that happen, but some people, again, sometimes you can get, one deal that's $30 million. One deal does not get you the ALC. You need at least 5 transactions.
Thank you.
So both.
Great. It doesn't look like we have any more questions. If you have a question, go ahead and pop that into the chat. We'll keep an eye on that. As we had mentioned earlier, this has been recorded and will be posted on our website, and I'll send a link out to everybody once we have it posted. It'll also be there in perpetuity, so you can go back as you're completing your portfolio to answer any of those questions. And then you can also email our questions to alcapp@rliland.com and or to Aubrie or Norma. Their email addresses are there on the screen as well. It looks like we don't have any other questions, so we can go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you everybody for participating in today's webinar. We hope this was informative and helped to answer your questions about completing your portfolio. As I said, it'll be posted on our website. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to any of us here at RLI and we can answer those for you.
Thank you all and good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you. And yes, we're always here to answer your questions. So don't be afraid to reach out.
Before we go, Emily's asking if it's not $10 million, but it's 25 transactions, is that good, or is the dollar amount 10 million?
No, if you've not reached $10 million by the time you've listed 25 separate transactions, stop at 25.
Right.
You don't need to keep listing, stop at 25. So it's the either or, 10 million with 5 transactions or more, or 25 separate land transactions.
If for some reason something needed to be replaced, transactions, then Aubrie will get back to you and you can submit them then. But
yes,
25, that'll do it.
That's exactly right.
Wonderful. And with that, we are going to wrap it up. Again, thank you everybody for joining us today, and we'll get this posted on our website as soon as we can. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.